Assalamu alaikum. Today we have in the CPS center our brother from the CPS USA team, Mr. Mohammad Asad Pervez. To me, Asad is like a younger brother, an inspiration to the youths of today. He is very aspirational when it comes to God's work and is presently involved with many initiatives of the CPS USA team. So let's have conversation with Asad. Assalamu alaikum, Asad. How are you?
Walaikum assalam.
Asad, many of the viewers would want to know about your background, about your education. So please tell us something about yourself.
So I'm originally from Bihar. I was born in Jamshedpur back when Bihar and Jharkhand was the same state. When I was 3 years old, my father got a job in UAE, and we lived in Sharjah. So from kindergarten to 12th grade, I grew up in the Middle East. I grew up in Sharjah. My dad worked in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, and then after school, I came back to India. I studied electrical and electronics engineering from Delhi Technological University. And then after that, I worked in India for a few years, and then I moved to the US to do my master's. I studied international business and data science, and I've been in the US since.
Right. Thank you, Asad, for briefly talking about yourself. Before I ask you the next question, I want to share a tradition which is attributed to Hazrat Ibn Abbas. So, the tradition about Hazrat Ibn Abbas, and as we know that Hazrat Ibn Abbas was one of the greatest mufassir of the Quran, and he's also the cousin of the Prophet Muhammad. Hazrat Umar bin Khattab, whenever he would face a difficult proposition, he would seek Hazrat Ibn Abbas' help. So once, a companion asked Hazrat Ibn Abbas about jihad. And to that, Hazrat Ibn Abbas said that, should I not tell you something which is superior to jihad? And then he said, building of a mosque, learning of the Sunnah, and reading of the Quran. And as we know, Maulana Wahiduddin Khan Saab emphasized and gave the call of reading and distribution of the Quran. And you yourself, are involved in distribution of the Quran. You distribute Quran to your co-workers, to your families, friends, and wherever you get an opportunity to give the Quran. So what motivated you to begin the distribution of the Quran?
That's actually a very big question. Right. And so I'll try and be as brief as I can. But I remember when I was in my college days, it suddenly occurred to me that the Quran isn't actually a very big book. You see, growing up, I had always been in a habit of reading. Some of my favorite authors in fiction were Roald Dahl and J.K. Rowling. And by the third grade, I had finished the entire Roald Dahl collection, and I was a big fan of the Harry Potter series. So, which is when it occurred to me that just the Half-Blood Prince, the sixth book in the series, has about 168,000 words. It's the same number of words as the Quran translation that's behind us by Maulana Wahiduddin Khan. So I thought that if I can read so many books in a language I understand, and I can, and I can relate to it, what's stopping me from reading the Quran? The reason was that I grew up in a middle class Muslim household, and how it works in our cultures and in our families is that there is no concept of reading the Quran translation cover to cover. Right. So you would read the Quran in Arabic, and if you want to read a translation, you would read a verse in Arabic, and then you would read a parallel verse in English. And this whole approach misses the point, because you need to read the Quran in a language you understand to actually make sense of what's being said. And mostly you never finish it. So when I had this realization in my college days, I asked my father Well, before I asked him, I tried to look for translations, and I looked at Pixel, Mohammad Asad,
Right.
Abdullah Yusuf, Ali's translations. Now, the issue with these translations were that even though they were brilliantly written and those translators did some really good work, but they weren't clear enough, because you got to understand that my generation is coming from a background of reading the Harry Potter books or the Roald Dahl books, or everything written in contemporary English. We are growing up watching American television.
Right.
So we need, so if we are to understand the Quran, we need it to be in a language which we can understand, and not just English. That doesn't suffice. You actually need to put it in a way where people can make sense of it.
Right.
So which is a very hard thing to do with some of the earlier translations, because they are decades old, centuries at this point. So I asked my father if there was a good translation he knew, and he found the PDF of Maulana Wahiduddin Khan's translation. At that time, I didn't know who Maulana Sahib was,
Right.
and but I remembered that it was Ramadan when I started, and my approach was the exact same traditional approach, that I thought I would read a para or a juz every night,
Right.
and I'll finish like the Quran in English in 30 days. But the first day when I sat with that translation, I finished almost half of it in the same night,
Right.
because it was, the book was so appealing, and the book certainly made sense to me when I was reading it in contemporary English. So and as you would have experienced, and many people experience, when you read the Quran speaks to you. The impact that book can have on someone when they read it in their language, it's phenomenal. I remember this one specific verse in Surah Al-Yusuf, when it comes towards the end, when Benjamin or Benjamin doesn't return with his brothers, and Yaqub alayhi salam, Jacob, he starts crying, and he accuses his son that you must have done something, and then he remembers Joseph, saying that because something similar had happened to Joseph
Right.
early on. So his sons tell him that, Father, will you cry till you die in this state? And Yaqub alayhi salam gave this response that, I only complain of my anguish and sorrow to God. And that was hit me personally, because my mother's biggest complaint ever since I was young is that I would never tell her anything about school or college, or if I had any problems in my life, I would just keep it to myself.
Right.
And she would make a lot of efforts for me to open up with her, but I just didn't know why I didn't want to tell her anything. But when I read that one verse in the Quran, it resonated with me at such a personal level that I couldn't read any further. I just had to go and prostrate in front of God when I read that verse. And likewise, a lot of people have go through different emotions when they read the Quran. You see verses like in Surah Al-Rahman where it talks about all the mercies and blessings of Allah, and all these beautiful stories and the struggles that the prophets went through, and the commitment through all of this. So when I finished it, that's when I realized that this book is something that everyone should read, whether you believe in it as a divine revelation from God, or you don't believe in it as a divine revelation of God. But it's something that can strike chords with you, which you probably didn't even know were there. So that motivated me. My personal experience, I wanted like all good things, you get some candy, you want to share it with people, right?
Right.
So like all good things,
Yeah.
I wanted to share my experience with others.
जज़ाकल्लाह असद. एंड आई थिंक आपने एक बहुत इम्पॉर्टेंट बात कही कि कुरान की जो लैंग्वेज है वो अंडरस्टैंडेबल होनी चाहिए, खासकर आज की जनरेशन को, कंटेम्प्रेरी ईडियम में. एंड मौलाना वहीदुद्दीन खान साहब की जब ट्रांसलेटेड कुरान पब्लिश हुई, सर्कुलेट हुई वाइडली, टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया ने बहुत एक अच्छा रिव्यू कैरी किया था और उसको टाइटल बहुत ज़बरदस्त दिया था, नॉट लॉस्ट इन ट्रांसलेशन. आई थिंक दैट इज़ द एसेंस ऑफ इट, कि ट्रांसलेशन करते वक्त कोई चीज़ इधर से उधर ना हो जाए या उसका मीनिंग ना बदल जाए. और खुशवंत सिंह जो बहुत ही बड़े लिटरेरी एकेडमिशियन रहे हैं, मेरी उनसे खुद भी मुलाकात हुई और हम लोगों ने उनको मौलाना का कुरान, इंग्लिश कुरान प्रेजेंट किया. तो उन्होंने भी असद एक रिव्यू कैरी किया हिंदुस्तान टाइम्स में, और उन्होंने लिखा कि मैंने अपने फेवरेट पैसेजेस डिफरेंट जो कुरान उनकी लाइब्रेरी में थे उसमें पढ़े, और फिर उन्होंने इस कुरान के ट्रांसलेशन को पढ़ा मौलाना साहब के और कंपेयर किया. And then he wrote this line which you can go online and see for yourself. It is also available on CPS website under the review button. He said that I will recommend not only non-Muslims to read this translation but also Muslims to read this translation, क्योंकि इसमें clarity बहुत ही par excellence है. Asad, that brings me to the next logical question. मैं जब भी मौलाना साहब के पास जाया करता था तो वो मेरे से पूछा करते थे कि क्या न्यूज़ लेकर आए हैं. वो अक्सर सभी से ये सवाल किया करते थे. चैप्टर्स के बारे में पूछते थे कि सब जगह क्या हो रहा है, एंड पर्टिकुलरली आपके लिए एक जुमला हर बार ये इस्तेमाल करते थे कि और असद की तरफ से क्या न्यूज़ है. आई मीन ही लव्ड यू सो मच. सो प्लीज़ टेल अस दैट हाउ डिड यू मीट मौलाना साहब. इसके बारे में बताएं हम सबको.
Following up on something you just said, Khushwant Singh, he's a very respected personality in India, and his contributions to Indian history is actually is significant. So when he said that Muslims should also read the Quran translation, like Maulana's Quran translation, it's something that needed to be said because हम लोग के कल्चर में है ही नहीं कि कुरान को ट्रांसलेशन से समझा जाए. एंड यही रीज़न है कि लोगों को उसका इम्पैक्ट क्या होता है रीडर पे पता ही नहीं है. तो मुस्लिम्स को पता ही नहीं होता है कि वो कुरान का क्या इम्पैक्ट हो सकता है लोगों पे, क्योंकि वो उन्होंने खुद कभी नहीं पढ़ा होता है. So my motivation in my final year was to give this copy of the Quran to all my juniors, but to all the Muslim juniors who were coming in, and at that time I remember I had one copy and I bought it from this online e-commerce store, which was out of stock. So I didn't know where I could get more copies.
Right.
So my friends told me that there's an address on the first page, One Nizamuddin West, New Delhi, which is this address of the studio, and and they said let's go and see. And it was honestly a unique thing to me because I grew up in a time where there was Google Maps and you could do all sorts of things. So we just read the address and we got to One Nizamuddin West, and I landed here. That's exactly how it happened.
Right.
And I saw this bookstore, so the Goodwood bookstore, which was downstairs. It had a collection of books on every topic imaginable. And what was even more surprising that they were all by the same author, like Maulana Wahiduddin Khan. And when I asked I don't remember who it was back then, but when I asked him that I need 25 to 50 copies of the Quran, he was surprised. He said, "Why do you need so many?" I said, "Well, I want to give it to my juniors because as I said, I had a really good experience reading it, and I wanted to share that experience with other people." So he said that, "Do you know Maulana Sahib gives lectures upstairs on the second floor?"
Okay.
And I said, "Well, I didn't know that." So how do I attend his lectures? Well, it happens every Sunday at 10:30. So come next week. I come next week, and Maulana wasn't here. He was in Canada at the RIS convention, and they were playing an old lecture.
Right.
So I thought I'll come the week after that as well. And again, Maulana wasn't there. And then I decided that if he's not there a third time, then I just won't come anymore.
Okay.
Now the third time was kind of a miracle because he landed here, I think Saturday night,
Right.
and then he was here for class.
For the class.
For the class.
He would always do that.
He wouldn't miss it.
Never miss it.
Right? And had he missed it, I would not have been here right now.
My God.
So Maulana did not miss his class, and he came here, he gave a lecture, and what would happen is that in his lectures he would refer a book, and since Good Word was downstairs, so I would write down the book he mentioned, and I would go buy that book from Good Word. I would make sure I read it before the next class on Sunday.
Right.
So I had a lot of free time in college. So that was my routine activities. I would sit at the back. I wouldn't personally meet or interact with Maulana. I would just listen to his lecture, take a book he mentions, and normally he would mention these books in the question and answers. Instead of giving details, he would say, well, I've written about it in this book or that book, go and read it. So I would go and read it, and I would come back. I would have questions. I wouldn't agree with everything naturally because because there's misalignment of backgrounds, right?
Right.
And but I always thought that I would ask these questions to Maulana when I build up the courage to meet him. I never built up the courage to meet him. Another incentive to come here, as I've told you before, was the tea you guys serve after class. I was a college student, so just getting some tea and biscuits after once in a while was good incentive. That's how I started coming and meeting Maulana.
Okay, that's some story.
That's a story.
Thank you. Okay, Asad, you would agree, whosoever would meet Maulana Waiduddin Khan Sahab would be left with a lifelong experience.
Right.
And I am here reminded of a tradition attributed to Hazrat Ibn Abbas. And he narrated that Prophet was once asked that who among all the associates is the best. So Prophet replied that one whose sight reminds you of God, and whose conversation adds to your knowledge and learning, and whose action helps you in remembering the hereafter. When we look at the life of Maulana Waiduddin Khan Sahab, whenever we used to see him or meet him, have conversation, the only conversation that would center around would be आखिरत के बारे में, खुदा के बारे में, मारिफत के बारे में. एंड हमेशा ये ऐसा होता था कि जब भी आप मौलाना साहब के साथ आप कोई बातचीत करें तो वो कोई नया एस्पेक्ट, नई बात बताते थे. एंड इट वुड ऑलवेज बी यूर एडिंग टू योर योर नॉलेज, योर लर्निंग. And his life was so disciplined. One can make out that how companions would have spent their life, so disciplined and as per Quran and the Sunnah. So what was your first impression when you met Maulana Sahab for the first time?
Maulana's reputation precedes him.
Right.
And most people who come here know of him from before coming here. My case was different. I did not know anything about Maulana. I had never heard of him, never read any of his articles or anything even in the news about him. So my first impression, you would say, was a pure first impression, not backed by any conditioning or any sort of pre-existing knowledge or notions about who he is. Mm-hmm. So of course, the first time when you meet Maulana Sahab, like everyone's a bit, hesitant to ask certain questions. Right. You don't want to offend him. You don't want him to, but he was so different.
Right.
Because his level of simplicity showed how approachable he was. When we would get comfortable with Maulana, you could go to him at any point of time, ask him any question, and he would answer it. His depth of knowledge was so vast.
Absolutely.
was incredible. And I'm not talking specifically in terms of religion, but in terms of science, like concepts I would study in engineering. He once explained me a concept using a transformer, and I was studying electrical engineering, and I was amazed that how does he know so much about a transformer. But he had that quality. You see, Maulana would assess you. He would first, ask you to say, to tell him something new. And when you would tell him something, he would assess you on how to best address your mind.
Right.
And he would do that with me. And in his company, when different people would come visit him, he would do that differently.
Right.
Something that I really loved about Maulana is that he never left any topic unaddressed. He never left a question unaddressed in your mind.
Right.
So every time he would teach you something, he would ask you to repeat it.
Right.
Now, now I remember the first, because like growing up, your teacher tells you something, you just go like, yes ma'am, samajh mein aa gaya, but us tarah se hota hai.
Right.
But with Maulana sir, I was doing the same thing, I would just sit there and he's like, do you understand? And I would say, Ji Maulana. Then he would say, okay, repeat it. Oh, now I'm in trouble. Like, I didn't know I was supposed to be paying attention.
He'll make sure that that's drilled down in your
Oh
head.
yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So he said, repeat it, and I was caught off guard, and now I'm embarrassed because I really wasn't able to repeat it.
Right.
So he said it again, and the second time he again asked me to repeat it, and then when I repeated it, that's when it occurred to me that when you try and explain a concept back or repeat a concept back, new questions come in your mind.
Correct.
You see, when you're only paying, when you aren't paying full attention in the first time and you're just going like, Ji Maulana, samajh gaya, you're not actually understanding the concept. You're pretty much, fulfilling a formality of as a listener. But conversations and the atmosphere about Maulana wasn't of listening, but it was rather of learning. So he would make sure that that you would repeat the concept, and he would assess that if you've actually understood it, and then you would follow up with questions. So I would repeat it, and then I would say, "Lekin Maulana, ye to वैसे भी हो सकता है, वैसे भी हो सकता है." And then he would dive deeper and get more,
Right.
and explain it further. But he wouldn't leave your question unanswered. That was one of the greatest qualities in him.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. And in that process of asking you to repeat and asking everyone who would visit him ki koi question, he would assess you, like you said, and would come down to your level.
Exactly.
So that he can explain.
Come
it.
down to our level.
Yeah,
that's exactly it.
So any particular incident that you would like to share with us that you remember interacting with Maulana Sahab?
There are so many incidences.
Right.
But this one incident which I remember till date, and it honestly motivated me. That one single incident, it motivated me for the rest of my life. Was so Maulana would give lectures Saturdays and Sundays, right?
Yes.
And I would come here Sunday evening, and I would spend time with him, and then I would spend time with him till he goes to bed. And then the next morning, I would come and spend time with him when he used to wake up. I've never woken up before him, but I would always find him sitting in his balcony, sunbathing, with some tea being prepared, and I would ask him a lot of questions. Once he volunteeringly told me something.
Okay.
And he just leaned forward to me like this, and he's like, कि असद साहब आप जानते हैं आप मेरी बात क्यों समझ सकते हैं? And I was like, okay, maybe he's gonna tell me something deep and profound. But he said something very simple. He's like, क्योंकि आप उर्दू नहीं जानते हैं, आप इंग्लिश जानते हैं.
अच्छा.
And I was a little confused, honestly.
Right.
What did he mean by this? But he explained it further, and then Dr. Frida Khanum also explained it further. Why is it that me knowing English, helped me understand him? Now, the reason it really resonated with me is because, you see, as I told you before, that I grew up in the Middle East, and as it's the case with most, immigrant parents or third culture kids, as they call us, where we are mixed between a couple of cultures.
Right.
Is that the parents always have this fear of losing their culture, with the succeeding generations who live in that country. So they always make these efforts for them to learn Urdu, for them to know about their, their traditions. And I know people in the U.S. who send their kids, to learn Urdu from really high colleges, just so that they can preserve, the tradition of knowing Urdu in their families, even though there is no utility for them in that country. No one has ever been successful, even though if the kids show some interest, they can get to a certain level. But the background of reading and literature and environment will always remain to be English or whichever language they're growing up in. So what happens to us, like the kids of the first generation kids who've moved out of the country, is that we grew up with this inferiority complex that, oh no, I don't know my own language. My parents can speak so well. My khalas and khalus and my chachas, and like they are proficient and they can read books in Urdu. I can't read a page. I mean, now I can read at a third grade level, but it was just such a massive inferiority complex. And I know that every one of you can relate with me who are growing up in a different country right now. So I told. But Maulana said something very different. He said that something I considered a weakness my whole life was actually a strength.
Okay.
And when I sought further clarification with Dr. Frida Khanum, it's not that people who know Urdu cannot understand Maulana. But the fact is that my exposure to, you could say, non-Urdu literature, it basically, English literature shapes your mind differently than Urdu literature.
Right.
So English literature is always more scientific, specific, to the point, and that's what Maulana's, you could say, MO, like mode of operations, always was. That's how he always explained things to you. So, because you see, we grew up learning science, and in our science, it was science is straightforward. Galileo comes up with a theory, then Newton comes up with a theory, disproves Galileo. It doesn't demerit Galileo, but you just accept a more progressive and more accurate theory. Now Newtonian physics was all we needed to land on the moon in '69, but Albert Einstein disproved everything Newton said, back in the '40s. That doesn't discredit Newton. It just means that it doesn't demerit Newton for his works, but everyone's now except Albert Einstein. Then Heisenberg comes up with his uncertainty principle, and then you just switch to the uncertainty principle. You don't hold on to an ideal of, oh, how can you disagree with Newton or Einstein or those before you. So the same thing happened to me when I grew up, hearing all these other different scholars and different people. And then when Maulana came up with something that addressed my mind further, it switched. It was easy for me to accept it. So when Maulana made this something I thought of a weakness in me into a strength, I realized that there is no, ideal Muslim or an ideal human being that, okay, if you want to contribute towards Islam or towards God's work, you have to know Arabic and then Urdu, and then you need to memorize like 10 juz of the Quran or something. No, God has made everyone different. God has given different people different abilities. All you have to do is discover what you are good at and work on that.
Right.
And it just changed my perspective of how I approached everything. And now. And now, I make constant efforts on skills which I feel I can do better, and not focus on my weaknesses. For my weaknesses, I go to people who can cover them up, I guess.
Right, amazing. And anyways, Asad, you're doing so well, on all fronts, and we'll come to that. But with that, rationale, just imagine that at a conscious or an unconscious level, मौलाना साहब ने आपके अगर कहीं माइंड में जहन में कोई एक नेगेटिव एलिमेंट था आपके उर्दू को ना जानने में उसको पॉजिटिव में कन्वर्ट कर
सही बात है
दैट्स व्हाट ही डिड ऑल हिज लाइफ एंड दैट्स व्हाट ही टोल्ड ऑल ऑफ अस कन्वर्ट नेगेटिविटी इनटू पॉजिटिविटी Asad, I'm sure you would have read other scholars. You've interacted with many other scholars. So how did you find Maulana Sahab different from the other scholars?
I mean, he's very different. If you actually read his book, Ulama or Dawr Jadid, which is now translated into English as well, you'll realize how his process of thinking and thought works differently. There are two things I can actually mention. So the first thing is, again, during one of these Sunday early morning sessions, he explained to me that the reason why people find conflict between religion and science, or I would rather say Muslims or people of faith find conflicts between religion and science, or why they are a little scared of science. What he said was that we've built up our faith or our understanding of Islam on superstition. Now, what science does is that science is based on reason. Now, reason breaks down superstition. So when reasonable arguments are made, when reasonable questions are raised by the world, everyone feels that their superstitious beliefs are crumbling down, which means their whole faith is crumbling down. So they feel like they're losing their faith.
Right.
This is the case of most of the youths, people growing up in Western countries, even in Eastern countries, but who are getting modern education, is that they feel that their faith is breaking because of reasonable, honestly, just very reasonable questions being raised by other people.
Right.
So how do you save this? Well, it's simple. Replace your superstitious grounds of beliefs with reasonable grounds of beliefs.
Right.
Because what science will do is that it's just going to further concrete or cement reason. So your faith just builds, grows more and more from there. This is one of the biggest difference between Maulana and most of the other scholars, is that his Islam, or when he explains Islam, he explains it based on reason. And that helps you, be more confident about what your beliefs are, what your faith system are, and also address, others when they ask questions. The other thing which is very different about Maulana, which I think is that maybe perhaps unique, is that he would never, ever, ever speak negatively about anyone, any group, any other scholar.
That's true. Yeah.
You can't catch him. In fact, he would get frustrated at questions when you would ask him questions. Oh, the Arabs aren't doing enough, or the Shias or the Sunnis or the Brahmins, and you would get frustrated. And he would get frustrated on these, questions, and he would say, "Look, we make this ideal version of what a true believer, a true Muslim should be, and then we project this ideal on the rest of the world. And then when people don't meet that standard, we start accusing them of being bad Muslims or of not doing enough for their faith. We do that on everyone but ourselves."
Right.
Now, Maulana's approach said that if you hold people on ideal standards,
Right.
God is going to hold you on ideal standards.
True.
Now, use the same ideal and question yourself. Where are you going to stand? Like, where do you stand based on your ideal? So, if you don't want God to hold you on ideal standards on the day of judgment, don't hold people on ideal standards in this world.
Right.
And I just felt that it's just such a beautiful way of looking at all the diversity in religion and all the diversity of beliefs and the belief system. And the different opinions of different scholars, and that's the difference why Maulana was never negative towards other people and other scholars are negative, is
Right.
because other scholars hold other scholars and other Muslim groups on ideal standards, which they believe is ideal. But Maulana, even though he would of course have a notion of what an ideal standard should be, but he wouldn't hold other people
Right.
on it. So he would never be negative. He would never speak negatively about anyone,
Right.
and he wouldn't even honestly address questions
Right.
when you would start speaking negatively.
Right. In fact, his approach, Asad, was always very rational and universal. Which even I, when I read about other scholars, they do have this element of we and they. मौलाना साहब के अंदर कभी भी
कभी नहीं
we
था.
and they वाला concept ही नहीं था, we and we वाला concept था. And I remember that I once met, before meeting Maulana Saab, I met a couple of people, and one of the Islamic scholar that I met, and I posed some questions which were related to existential reality. तो उन्होंने सिर्फ एक जवाब दिया कि आप सवाल ना करें, आप बस मान लें. वही सवाल मैंने मौलाना साहब को जब प्रेजेंट किया तो मौलाना ने बहुत रैशनली, साइंटिफिकली, लाइक यू एक्सप्लेन्ड, उसको एक्सप्लेन किया. तो एक यूनिवर्सैलिटी वाली जो अप्रोच है, जो इस्लाम में है और हमें बतानी है दुनिया को, तो मौलाना साहब ने वो बहुत अच्छे से पेश करी है उसको. So Asad, that brings us of course naturally to the next question कि मौलाना साहब ने अपनी पूरी ज़िंदगी जो है मारिफत को अनफोल्ड करने में लगा दी हम सब के लिए. उन्होंने इस्लाम को कंटेम्प्रेरी मीडियम में प्रेजेंट किया, एज वी ऑल नो. So what aspect of his ideology, I mean you did talk about it in your previous answers, but what aspect of his ideology really addressed your mind? इसके बारे में भी हम सबको बताइए.
There are so many, and these days I actually feel that more and more people, are coming to the same conclusions which Maulana had been writing, about for over 80 years. I'll read a little bit from a list. So the first is the aspect of self-correction. So Maulana's attitude was always like blame thyself, see where you're lacking,
Absolutely.
and then fill in that that gap. I think George Bernard Shaw was the Irish playwright.
Right.
So he gives his example where he says that someone approached him and asked, okay, how do I fix problems of society? And then and George Bernard Shaw's answer was, well, identify the problem and then fix that problem in yourself. Because we make up society. So if we want to correct society, just correct yourself. Enough corrected people will make a corrected society. So Maulana's attitude of always, critiquing yourself and, correcting yourself is important. But that cannot happen without something he would also talk about, deconditioning. Now, deconditioning is the first time I honestly heard, from Maulana, and now and today I realize the value of it, because you see, you need to unlearn or remove your natural biases, the biases you've gathered from literature, or no one reads these days, from YouTube, social media, or just people around you, or even the news. So you need to decondition yourself from all your natural biases, your pre-existing notions about things, and then make fresh start towards it. It's not something you do once. You keep doing it over and over again. You will be conditioned, towards something in a certain way. Decondition yourself and then start self-correcting.
Right.
Another part of his ideology, which I personally find so rational, and I find hard to believe why other people don't accept it, is his concept of action and reaction, where he talks about that on a global scale or in any scale, people react to what you act. Now you would say, you would go around calling people Islamophobic, or say that people hate Muslims, or they're making anti-Muslim policies or laws, but we've given them every reason to, and all that is a reaction of what our attitude is towards or how we interact with people. Like Rajat bhai, I love you, right? But I know that if I do something to annoy you, you will get annoyed,
Right.
and so the onus is always on us. on what other people's reactions would be. So if we, are careful with ourselves and with what we do, uh, people will react accordingly. So you do good deeds, people will react, in a positive manner.
Right.
But if you trigger them, if you hit their nose, if you take away their freedom, people will react negatively. It's such a simple concept. We see it in nature. You water a plant, it grows. You don't water it, it's not going to grow. So it's a very beautiful concept.
Right.
God realization and orientation, which you spoke about, was also something that appealed to me. Everyone talks about everywhere talks about living, with God in mind, or living with the hereafter in mind. But you can't do that unless you've realized it in this world, because you can't act on something unless you've realized it to be the truth. And that's why Maulana focused so much on marifa and understanding and spirituality, is because you need to realize, you need to make that connection with God, and only when you make that connection can you truly have a God-oriented life.
Right.
And lastly, of course, which changed my life, is reading the Quran in your language. That's something Maulana always encouraged,
MashaAllah.
and he always asked us to take the Quran to people in languages they understand,
Right.
so they can read it.
Right. So, Asad, like we know, he's authored more than 200 books. I know each and every book is a masterpiece, full of wisdom. But any particular book which is your favorite book, which you'd like to share with all of us?
So it's it's such a difficult question
I know it's
to answer.
Every book of his, like I said, is full of wisdom.
Every book appeals to different people differently. And that's what the truth is. So
Right.
what my favorite doesn't mean that it's the best book he's ever written. Someone can come up with a different understanding, or a different answer for this. One book which I was blown away when I read it was actually God Arises,
Yeah.
because I had a background in science,
Right.
and the depth he went into science, and
It's amazing.
and it's just amazing. He takes all the criticism that's raised by modern society on religion and God, and addresses it at the same level.
Right.
He doesn't back it up with, because the Quran says so, or because the Prophet said so.
Right.
He uses the same criticism or the same level of argument to address them, and he succeeds. Anyone who reads that book will know he succeeds. What's incredible is that, not very recently, but maybe 10 or 15 years ago, Anthony Flew, I believe his name was, who was a very prominent atheist. He wrote a book, There Is a God. He published it like 20 years ago, and the book was subtitled How the World's Most Notorious Atheist Became believed in God.
Okay.
And he listed out all his arguments in that book, saying that, well, this is what my atheist argument used to be, and then now I realize that, well, there's an answer to it. And he listed out about maybe a couple of, in fact, a lot of arguments. But what was surprising is that anyone who reads that book by Anthony Flew, is that 90% of it is exactly what Maulana wrote in God Arises maybe 50 years before him. It's you could honestly hold that book down for plagiarism, but the spirit is that Maulana realized all these concepts and he addressed it decades before people even knew
yes.
like it existed. So and Anthony Flu's book was a New York Times bestseller. God Arises is also a very popular book.
It has been part of the syllabus of
many
Arab universities.
many Arab universities.
Yes.
And of course, another book I connected with was Mohammad, the Prophet for All Humanity.
Yeah.
Now,
wonderful book.
That's a book. The Prophet's life never gets represented in a way where, like how it's represented in Mohammad, the Prophet for All Humanity. Everywhere, other books which you read, also good works, it's either historical, biographical, but with Maulana's book, it's, apart from being historically correct and biographically accurate, it explains the mission the Prophet was on, and that's the context. Like the book highlights is that anyone who reads that book can truly understand the purpose of the Prophet,
Right.
the Prophet's mission.
Absolutely. Uh, Asad, as you know that Maulana Saab established Center for Peace and Spirituality International in 2001. And now CPS movement is spreading far and wide. When did you decide to join formally the CPS mission?
It's well, it wasn't in 2001 because I was only 7 years old. But I remember that in 2016, I had an opportunity to travel a lot. So I traveled all through the world. I went to Hong Kong. I went to the US. I went to New York. I went back to my hometown, Jamshedpur. And something happened which I felt was a sign of God.
Right.
So the first incident is that in Jamshedpur, there's this really old bookstore. It's manned by this really old, you could say, bookworm of Urdu books. He has a bookstore not bigger than this stage probably.
Okay.
And he would and I was in his book and I saw that he had al Risala, al Risala copies with him. So I told him that, I know about Maulana Wahiduddin Khan because by then I had attended a few of his lectures, and the expression on his face changed. He said that this is that if you know Maulana Wahiduddin Khan, you don't need to know anyone else. Like that's what he said to me, and he was such a avid reader and appreciator of Maulana's work. And then my khala was with me, and he told her that if your nephew reads Maulana Wahiduddin Khan, then you don't need to worry about him anymore. So I took that experience, and then and somewhere in the back of my mind that experience existed, and I was traveling everywhere. Now, cut forward to Manhattan. I was in New York. I was traveling cheap, so I stayed in the youth hostel. Now in a youth hostel, they want people to interact, and there's a community pre-COVID times. So in the breakfast area, everyone has breakfast in this common space where they give Wi-Fi.
Right.
Now in the breakfast area, I was sitting down, having breakfast, and this European lady, Caucasian, she comes and sits in front of me, and she's holding Maulana's translation.
Okay.
Right? Of all the places in the world, like to see Maulana's translation, like you wouldn't imagine that it's going to be held by a Caucasian, European woman in front of having breakfast with you in a youth hostel in Manhattan.
Unbelievable.
It's so unbelievable that honestly there could be nothing more opposite in the world than an 8-year-old bookstore owner in a gully in Jamshedpur and a European woman, sitting in a youth hostel in Manhattan. But what was common was Maulana Wahiduddin Khan, between all of them.
Right.
And that's when I realized what the reach and the spread of Maulana's work was, and what he was trying to achieve is to get to everyone. And I had a very nice conversation with her.
Okay.
But I felt that her sitting there with Maulana's translation, it wasn't a coincidence.
Yeah.
Because you see, us wearing the same socks is a coincidence, or the same kurta is a coincidence. But something that narrow, had to be a sign.
Absolutely.
So that's when I decided that I'm going to go back and, contribute to the CPS mission.
Right.
In any way I could.
And of course, then, you moved on. CPS, if we come to CPS USA team, Asad, it's doing an amazing work in the field of dawah work. Maulana himself has traveled, if I'm right, more than 10 times. 2 times I had the opportunity to go with him to US, for various programs. We would like to know, Asad, from you about something about CPS USA team. Please tell us about the CPS USA team.
So the CPS USA team is led by 5 core members, and and primarily it was started by Khaja Kalimuddin, who knew Maulana back from when he was in Africa, and he moved to the US and he set it up over there. It's as old as the CPS center in New Delhi, and since inception it has distributed about 1.5 million translations of the Quran, so much that that you could almost find it everywhere at this point of time. You would go to a masjid, people are going to have it. If people are talking about the Quran on video, it's very likely they have it behind them on a bookshelf or in their hands. It was this pure dedication that it got to this point. Apart from that, we have study circles. We do these sessions with kids, with the women, with other people, where we read and we discuss. Then we have a lot of we go to book fairs. That's also a key activity which people do here. Right now, we went to the Arizona Book Fair, which was very successful and beautiful. The response we got. Then we participate in a lot of digital activities. And at the same time, we've recently launched the Maulana Wahiduddin Khan Legacy Competition.
We'll of course come to that,
Yeah.
But Asad, when was your last interaction with Maulana Sahab?
So physical interaction was. So I remember when I was going for my studies abroad in 2018. I realized that I'd spent almost 3 or 4 years in his company, and I never had a book signed by him. So I took my copy of God Arises and I went to him over there and I asked him to sign it. So he asked me that, Asad Sahib, aap ja rahe hain? And I said, Ji Maulana, main ja raha hu. Then he said,
This was which year?
2018.
2018. Okay.
2018.
Okay.
And then he asked me, क्या अब हमारी कभी मुलाकात नहीं होगी? And honestly, like pre-Maulana times, I would have been like, ज़रूर होगी Maulana, inshallah. But being with him for so long, I answered, Maulana, इसकी guarantee आप भी नहीं दे सकते, मैं भी नहीं दे सकता. So, which was true, because in 2019 I had to make an emergency visit to India. My grandmother was ill, so I stopped by his house, and it was late. My flight was delayed, so I got to ask him this one last question, and the question was, Maulana, मौत के बाद क्या होता है?
Okay.
What happens right after death? And he said that exactly किसी को नहीं पता, लेकिन मतलब ये पता है हमें कि आखिरत होगी, judgment होगा, लेकिन there is a lot of uncertainty exactly what happens like after death. He explained the seriousness about it. So this was my last physical interaction with him. But then when I was in the US, he would often call and talk to me.
Yes.
And yeah.
So that he kept himself updated, as he would also ask me every time, like I said, कि असद की तरफ से कोई news. So of course he kept the touch on. But Asad, you just spoke, you were talking about some of the activities of CPS USA team. If you can, and you also mentioned about, the legacy competition. So if you can talk about those activities and what is the objective of this Maulana Wahiduddin Khan Legacy Competition, if you can tell us about it.
So, regarding the activities, well, of course, we are, apart from distributing the Quran, we are also trying to get the reasonable and the rational explanation of religion out there. So, every activity kind of centers towards it. So we've also started investing in some digital outreach activities, which has actually been proved to be very, very successful. The Maulana Wahiduddin Khan Legacy Competition was launched this year, and the registrations are still open. So please apply for it. The purpose was for people to read Maulana's literature. Think critically, analyze it, and basically take his work forward. And I realized that human beings are incentive natured. It's how God made us. You see, only when we think of the incentive of the afterlife do we work actively for it. The larger we feel the incentive is, the more we work towards it.
Right.
So and that's why every form of competitiveness produces better and better, you could say, participants or researchers or athletes. It's only because Roger Federer was so good and Nadal was so good that you start seeing athletes like Djokovic come up and, you know, and likewise.
Right.
So it's the same case everywhere, and I felt that there was honestly very little work that's done in the field of Islamic research and Islamic critical thinking. So I thought that if we could turn it into a competition, you know, it would incentivize more people to more aggressively read and research and take things forward. So the idea is to continue it and continue it for as long as we can, and every year give you know, opportunities for people to work on his message.
And I think you've kept a grant of $5,000, which is very high amount. But tell us, how's the response been? Are you getting good responses from different parts of the world?
So the total grant is way above that. It's almost $9,000.
$9,000.
Right. So the $5,000 is the first place for the best research paper.
Okay.
And then there are grants for the second best research paper.
Right.
And likewise, we have 3 categories. So the essay writing has another 2 grants, and then the last one is book review, which also has an award attached to it. So there is the response has been very well. So far, we've had over 400 registrations competing for the same five top positions.
Coming from different parts of the world.
All over. Like, I cannot name a continent where I haven't got a response from. I'm getting responses from German universities, from Africa, India and Pakistan. It's obviously more weighted here because Maulana is popular here. I've got responses from institutes in the US.
So it's reached everywhere.
It's reached everywhere, and some people are people are messaging me that, hey, my research paper is ready. When do I get to submit it?
Okay.
So my biggest fear was that, you know, people would register and not write it. But I know that I'm getting at least one research paper from this.
So, you know, you must participate. I think the submissions are open. The submissions will open in the month of May. So there's still a lot of time left. Please do participate. And for details, you can log into CPS USA website. You can get details from there. Asad, I want to come to a next very important question. You know, post Maulana, many people, you know, sometimes question that, you know, the mission will reduce in its effectiveness, or, you know, people will forget him. What do you want to say on that? Has the mission lost its effectiveness? Has it slowed down? What do you feel about it?
Nothing can be further than the truth.
Right.
That cannot be further from the truth. It's not only has it slowed down, it's grown beyond measure. Last year alone, we printed 500,000 copies of the Quran. That's like printing one Quran every single minute.
Wow.
And this is physical copies. If you actually go into digital, we launched the Maulana Wahiduddin Khan's Quran audiobook. And within a year, we've got 200,000 downloads on it. The amount of participation and the volunteers we are seeing from all over the world, it's honestly getting too much to handle, and you know, it's a blessing from God, and I really feel that in the coming couple of decades, Maulana's legacy, his research work, will be concreted in history, inshallah, in a way that everyone would be aware of his name, and many people also question, and you know, it's like, oh, you're spreading Maulana Wahiduddin Khan and, you know, like, about him. Well, no, see, CPS isn't a cult. It's not, you know, a personality worshipping, you know, organization. You know, people come here with different backgrounds, different views, and you don't have to be of any fiqh or faith or Shia or Sunni or even religious or even Muslim at all to be part of CPS.
So important, yeah.
Exactly, and it's because everything we're just centered over something which is so common, the Quran. You know, there's no two different versions. There's no two versions of it, and we are centered around God. And that's again something that's common with, I would say, about 90% of the world. So it's so that's why the response has been amazing, and I really feel that if we don't slow down our momentum, and we keep our spirits high, and we just leave everything to God, then what we are trying to achieve is to inculcate the feeling of spirituality and God orientation in people. Like that day isn't far away.
Right. In fact, as we speak, there are more chapters getting formed globally. कल ही हमारी जब नेटवर्किंग मीटिंग भी थी असद, तो उसमें भी एक्टिविटीज़ के बारे में शेयरिंग हुई, एंड दे वर अमेजिंग एक्सपीरियंसेस एट हाउ इन कायरो, चेन्नई, पाकिस्तान, डिफरेंट पार्ट्स ऑफ द वर्ल्ड CPS इज़ मेकिंग इनरोड्स. और मेरे को असद एक इंसिडेंट याद आता है जो कि बहुत इम्पॉर्टेंट है. मौलाना साहब का इंतकाल 21 अप्रैल 2021 को हुआ. ठीक एक महीना पहले मार्च 2021 में उन्होंने कहा, उनका ये जुमला था कि याद रखिए ये मिशन जो है ये आंसुओं पे खड़ा हुआ है और ये आंसू कभी ख़त्म नहीं होने वाले. फिर उन्होंने कहा कि मेरा ये यकीन है, मेरा ये बिलीफ है कि CPS अपने मिशन के अंजाम पर ज़रूर पहुंचेगा, बस आप सबको आपस में इख्तलाफ नहीं करने हैं. तो इस कन्विक्शन के साथ मौलाना साहब ने कहा, जो कि हम देख रहे हैं कि कैसे फैल रहा है CPS ग्लोबली. Asad, I want to come down to the next question, which is that you have been personally involved in distribution of Quran, not just at a larger level but even at an individual level. आपके interactions मेयर के साथ, some Hollywood celebrities के साथ भी, and with many people you've had. Any particular incident that you want to share with us?
Every single every single incident is so unique, but there's something which I find common is that it becomes it's unbelievably easy.
Right.
And because you would see that like security guard, like whenever there's a prominent personality, giving a speech or walking down the street, they're always backed by
people,
like,
think they're non-approachable.
They are non-approachable,
Yeah.
and they're backed by and they give the impression that they're non-approachable because they have all these big bulky guys around them, like
Yes.
like you can't even look them in the eye, or else that's they're gonna finish you off right there.
Right.
So, but every time I approach them with an intention of giving the Quran, they've just moved away. I mean, there was this one time I was approaching a very famous personality, and there was a guard standing right in front of him, and
Right.
everyone who wanted to meet him, he would just tell them, "Go, leave."
Right.
And I didn't know why I felt that I should even attempt it, but the moment I stood in front of him, he just stepped aside. It was unbelievable. Like he just stepped aside, and I went and got to meet him, and then he wouldn't let anyone behind me come in as well.
Amazing. Yeah.
It's almost like the Quran had to be given to him,
Right.
right then and there. And likewise, when I met Governor Charlie Baker, who was the governor of Massachusetts, the same position of a chief minister. He just he was in this private opening, and he just walked out, and he walks up to me, and I shake his hand like Governor, I appreciate you visiting our neighborhood, and here's a gift. Yeah. But what was even more amazing was once when I was touring New York with my parents, and we just got off from the ferry that takes you to see the Statue of Liberty. So it's called Battery Park, and towards the end of the Battery Park, my parents got hungry, I got hungry, so we were having these famous chicken gyros of New York next to a food cart.
Right.
And the mayor was giving a speech. He was inaugurating the statue. It was a closed private event guarded by maybe like 50 to 75 cops. And the mayor of New York is kind of like a president of a small country. New York is a massive, massive place.
Yes.
And I thought that there was absolutely no way I could approach him and give him the Quran. But I just stood there, as far as close as I could get, and he suddenly gets a phone call.
Right.
He gets a phone call, and he stops his meeting with people like midway, and he exits the place
Right.
right there, and the guards open the the barricade for him to exit.
And come straight to you.
And he walks straight towards me, and now he's looking me in the eye, and I said, "Well, Mr. Mayor, I have a special gift for you." That's how I always approach people.
Yes.
I never go like, here's a Quran, take it, read it, or you're doomed.
Yeah.
No, you always give it as a gift, and people are well receiving of gifts. So, and he said, "1 sec, buddy, I got to take this call," and he asked the person with him to collect it from me.
Right.
And then I gave it to his assistant. So there are so many of these incidences I could name, which are inexplainable, but I've realized that every time you have good intention, it's like you just got to stand up, make the effort, and God and angels takes they take care of the rest.
Yeah. And I think, Asad, one very important lesson that we get from this particular interaction of Asad is that you have to carry Quran always. Maulana Sahab always used to say, carry the Dawa literature. You don't know who you will meet or whom Allah will make you meet on that particular day. Now imagine if all this happened and you didn't have the copy of the Quran, you would have felt that, I lost a great opportunity.
I would have been depressed for weeks.
Yeah. So, always carry Quran in your bag, in your car, wherever you go, keep Dawa literature, and please keep giving it to people. And that's how we need to take the message forward to far and wide. Asad, you also had the opportunity to meet Javed Ghamidi Sahab. He appreciated Maulana Sahab a lot. They've had programs together, and Maulana Sahab also, regarded Javed Ghamidi Sahab a lot. You also happened to interview him, and that video went viral. What did he say about Maulana Sahab? If you can share that experience with all of us.
Anyone who would meet Ghamidi Sahab personally will solemnly testify that he's a very, very, very good man, a very good human being, and he's very soft-natured, and he's very knowledgeable. He has extensive research on Islam, and he's pretty much read everything, like there is to read about anything at this point.
Yeah.
And so he, of course, whenever people are independent scholars, like Maulana Sahib was an independent scholar, Ghamidi Sahib was an independent scholar. So whenever you have these students of Islam who've tried to discover faith on their own grounds, they always have difference of opinions. It's absolutely, no one's going to be perfect, and it's natural. So Ghamidi Sahib, despite having certain differences with Maulana Sahib, he doesn't demerit Maulana Sahib in his eyes,
Right.
In any way. And in fact, he encourages people to read Maulana's translation. When I met some of the other members of Al-Mawrid and the Ghamidi Center of Islamic Learning,
Right.
they always give Maulana's translation to young people, to the youth, and they give them some of Maulana's books to read. So it's so it was very humbling to because when we discuss about Maulana at our level, at our level of knowledge and understanding, and we and how we interacted with him. But when a scholar of the stature of Ghamidi Sahib, talks highly of Maulana, that's when you know that even if you remove our intellectual limitations, even at that level, Maulana is still regarded as a very knowledgeable and prominent scholar.
Right. Okay. And Asad, how are Maulana Waiduddin Khan Sahab's videos have become hugely popular? How are they viewed in the West? What has been your experience?
We still need to do a lot of work in taking it to the West, right? And but the message is pure, and every time I've shared one of Maulana's audio or video lectures with the people where there is subtitles with English, then they've always given me like really, really positive responses, and they said, well, I've always had this question, or he's explained it so wonderfully. So his ideology and his approach is appreciated, but we still need to do a lot of work in taking it forward.
Right. One other important development that took place in the West, in US, is that you started giving khutbas in mosque, and we were very happy. And I happened to watch one of your video of the khutbah. It was like so full of marifat and practical lessons. It was really amazing. So, what inspired you to start giving khutbas in the mosque?
So when Maulana passed away, I felt that I had taken my relationship with him for granted. I always had this relationship of being a student and him being my teacher, my guru, and just trying and learning from him.
Right.
But what I realized later on was he was not only passing information and knowledge to us, he was also passing down a responsibility. Because if we want the same knowledge to be given to other people and to the next generations, now we have to take forward what he taught us.
True.
So I had that in the back of my mind, and then there was a mosque where the Imam once came. He was very tired, and Imam Abdullah Farooq, who also visited our center, and he was very tired and very. And I asked him how his health was.
Right.
So he said, I'm getting old for this, and today I was really tired. It's like, we need people who can give khutbas. Well, I said, okay, just reach out to me. Yeah. So in the beginning, he was nervous and I was nervous, but my first khutbah on habits was actually very well received. And then, Alhamdulillah, and then people, referred me to different mosques.
Yeah.
And now Alhamdulillah, I've got more opportunities. The great thing is that I am no short of content. Maulana's literature and his work is so precise and so categorically written that anytime I think of a topic, all I have to do is Control F on 10 PDFs on the CPS USA global.org website, and everything is there. So just somehow trim it to a 25-30 minute khutbah and prepare for it and give it.
MashaAllah. So, Asad, if I may ask you, what is your goal in life?
It's one of the last lessons which Maulana taught me, and he asked me a question that Asad Sahib, आपको पता है मुसलमानों की सबसे बड़ी जिम्मेदारी क्या है? So do you know what the biggest responsibility of Muslims is in the world?
Yeah.
And honestly, I had a flood of answers. I thought, okay, well, they'll have to fix poverty, and they have to fix all these other things, and there's so many social causes we can look into, but basically take over the world in every field possible. But his answer was so simple and straightforward. He said it's to take the Quran to everyone in a language they understand, and inshallah, and I was. And I was amazed that it never occurred to me that the real responsibility is so simple. The Quran is written. Right? All you have to do is, it's written, it's getting printed, it's available. All you got to do is just
stand up and give.
Just give it to a friend. Like, show them a text, like WhatsApp forward it or something. But but when he said that, that's when I realized that my goal in life has to be that to work on this. And basically help build CPS and help, make a global level institution which can self-sustainably, carry out this work.
Inshallah.
So it exists in the Christian community and the Jewish community. They have a lot of spirit when it comes to taking, the word of God forward. We lack it, but inshallah, with time, as we realize the importance of this work, we can do it. Another way to put this is that it was the core mission of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His whole life was just about taking the message of God directly to people.
Yes.
And that's pretty much what I want to do in life too.
Yeah. In fact, Maulana Sahib once gave very important advice that when you have a starting point, like what Asad mentioned, then after having that starting point, you should fight every thought to stay put on what you've decided as a plan till you achieve it. So, Asad, we all pray that you achieve this plan,
We achieve
and
this
we
plan.
all
Ameen.
are with you, on it.
Ameen.
Yeah. So that brings me to the last question, Asad. That you are a youth yourself. What is the message that you would like to give to the youths of today, and particularly to the CPS members globally? So we would like to know your views on that.
It's a well. What you see, there's this hadith where in the early days of Islam, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he asked for help and support, and the one who got up was Hazrat Ali, and the Prophet went like Anta ya Ali, like you, O Ali.
Yes.
He was so taken aback by this young person standing up, with all his spirit and all his time. When we are young, we have a lot of energy and we have a lot of ambitions, and we are in this mental state that we can fight with the world. That's pretty much what we needed. I'm not saying that we are going to fight with the world.
Right.
What I'm actually trying to say is that our level of energy and time and free time is so high that we can make the best contributions towards this work.
Right.
And what distracts us is material motives or material ambitions.
Absolutely.
You see, and material ambitions, people think it's always about money or property. But no, even ambitions like I won't be happy till I work in this MNC or in Microsoft or have a job in Google or I get into MIT or Harvard. All these kind of desires which don't have any actual value in the hereafter is pretty much a material and a worldly desire. So if we can limit our material ambitions and refocus the same energy towards this work, then the greatest contribution comes from the youth, and we've seen that like over and over again in Prophet Isa al-Islam's life and Musa al-Islam's life, that it was always the youth which actively
Right.
worked and
Yeah.
took things forward.
And I think the strength of CPS is the youth. मौलाना साहब ने एक बारी दुआ करी थी और उन्होंने हमसे शेयर किया था कि मैंने अल्लाह से ये दुआ करी कि मुझे सालेह फैमिली दीजिए, लेकिन अल्लाह ने मुझे सालेह प्लस फैमिली दिया. And I got the best companions in this mission, as Maulana Waiduddin Khan Saab said. Jazakallah, Asad. Thank you so much for sharing a wonderful session, sharing your inspirational journey with all of us. And we all pray to God that He gives you super success and eases your task. And if you live in USA and you want to join CPS USA youth team, or you want to contribute your time for God's cause, or you want to sponsor drives for Quran distribution, then please write to us on info@cpsglobal.org. We will connect you with Mr. Mohammad Asad Pervez in USA. Thank you for watching today's program. We will be back next Sunday, 10:30 a.m. Thank you.